Hi everybody. I'm doing monthly Q&As over on my Patreon where I answer questions about the old clay, about art, and about all sorts of other stuff. You can join my Patreon for free where you'll get access to these Q&As, official art and lore entries, updates on my future videos, and all sorts of other cool stuff. I wanted to post this first one on YouTube just so that everyone could see it, but if you want to watch future Q&As, go over to my Patreon. Alright, that's it. Enjoy the video. Hi everyone, and welcome to the first Q&A for July 2026. To start off, I wanted to go over briefly about how these Q&As are going to work. They're going to be a little bit more casual, a little bit more off the cuff. Usually with my videos, I do a lot of scripting. I practice the script and record it several times to get the best takes and edit it down pretty heavily into something that's palatable. Hopefully that comes across. But for these Q&As, I think I'm going to keep them a little bit more casual, a little bit, fewer edits, longer form, stuff like that. So I might end up rambling a little bit on the questions, but hopefully that's something that you guys actually enjoy listening to. To start off, I think for these Q&As, I want to begin each one of them by taking a little bit of a look back at the past month to sort of reflect on what happened, how I'm feeling, to have a month-to-month marker of the progress that the old clay is making. So about a month ago, almost exactly a month ago at the date of recording this video, I had about, I think, 72 YouTube subscribers, almost nothing on Instagram, even though I had been posting my art there for years, and a TikTok with literally one cumulative view for all of the videos that I put out on it. But then I uploaded my designing a body horror magic system video, and the short that I posted on TikTok sort of started to go viral. And then it started to go viral on Instagram, which brought a lot of people over to my YouTube channel. And in the matter of days, I had gone from like 72 subscribers to a couple thousand subscribers. By the end of the week, I believe, I don't remember the timeline exactly, but I had hit 10,000. And now, a month later, we are closing in on 20,000. I have made a Discord community which has almost 800 people, or actually this morning we passed 800, with a bunch of people in there theorizing and chatting and, plotting against each other, which is really fun. I designed merch. I got a Patreon that you guys are watching this on. It has been a very surreal month for me. Everything happened very quickly. I've been sort of adjusting to the new level of audience. It's really rad. It's really great. But I feel like I'm trying to handle, dealing with all of these different platforms, all the people reaching out to me. I'm really trying to get back to everybody as in a timely fashion, but it's really difficult. But I feel like if people are taking the time and effort to engage with what I create and reach out to me, I should, give them the respect of putting in my time and effort to reach back out to them. So hopefully I've been doing a good job of that. I've been trying my best, but there's just a little too much to handle at this point, which I suppose is a good problem to have. But yeah, that is where we are coming into August of 2026. All right, now let's just get into the questions. Like I said, I might ramble a little bit, but, you know, you've been warned. The first question is from the Salinist. Have you created an entire language yourself for TOC, or did you create some simple phrases and words? Also, is it inspired by Scandinavian languages? Yeah, so the conlang that I created for the Old Clay, one of the conlangs I've created, the one that I've done by far the most work on, is called Gret. And it is a full conlang. It's not just a couple of words or phrases. It's a full conlang. The dictionary, I don't have the exact numbers right now, but I think it's close to 1,000 words at this point. But it has full grammatical rules, very intense verb conjugation. The grammar is heavily based on Latin, so there is a huge emphasis on verb conjugation and, you know, like noun declension and stuff like that, if anyone knows what that is. I think any of the linguists listening are gonna love this, and if you're not into language at all, this is just gonna be nonsense to you. But the structure of the language grammatically is very heavily based on Latin. But the phonology, the quality of how the language actually sounds, is heavily based off of German, with certain sounds borrowed from Russian and Arabic and Hebrew. Not that those are the only languages that contain those sounds that I was taking, but those were like the specific languages that I pulled specific sounds from, particularly like the fricatives and aspirants. So again, if you are into language, you'll know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, that's not going to mean anything to you. But as you might have noticed, the language is polysynthetic, which means it takes a bunch of smaller root words and kind of jams them all together into one big long word that can be an entire clause or an entire sentence, which is not how Latin or German works necessarily. I guess under a certain point of view, ancient Latin was polysynthetic since they didn't have any formal spacing or punctuation, which is why, you know, verb conjugation was such a big deal, because it structured their clauses in the ending of the verb. But anyway, so that's why there are a lot of like really long words in Gret. Like if you've seen the ending that I put at a lot of my texts, that's 3 words that creates an entire like multi-clause sentence. I really hope I can do a full in-depth guide to Gret later on. It's something that I've actually gotten a far more interest in than I thought I would. I didn't imagine many people would be interested in the conlang that I made. But there does seem to be at least a little bit of interest. The issue is just there's so many things I want to make, so many videos, so many pieces of art that I want to draw, so many topics I need to cover, that I don't know exactly when a full in-depth analysis of Gret is going to be a thing, but hopefully it's coming soon. I initially just made the language in order to have consistent naming conventions across my world, or at least like this specific location in the world. But the more I got into it and the more I really went in depth, I've always been into language, so I kind of really slid into it and got very in depth. But yeah, that is Gret. Hopefully I can get a little bit more in depth on it soon. Hopefully. The next question is from Aurora Sky. What are some real-world cultural influences for your work, languages, clothing, behavior, social norms, etc.? That's a really good question. So obviously I just touched on language, which was a pretty significant impact. The entire inspiration, like sort of the impetus for the Old Clay, was ancient Germanic folklore. The like weird, esoteric, like forest spirits that get up to all sorts of shenanigans and like steal kids. Like it's all sort of like dark and creepy, and really out there. And I really liked that. So that was my sort of initial inspiration for the setting. It's gotten very far away from that as time has gone on, because the world has sort of taken on a life of its own. It's becoming a lot less whimsical and magic-y, and sort of becoming a thing of its own. In terms of other cultural influences, obviously a huge aspect of this world is alchemy. Alchemy existed all across the Eastern Hemisphere. As far as I know, I mean, I'm not too well versed in like any sort of Western Hemisphere alchemy, but my primary focus was like the Eastern Hemisphere alchemy, and not just sort of like the European stuff that you tend to see a lot, pushed in like Western culture, from like Greece and up through like Renaissance, medieval England. There was an enormous amount of alchemy going on in the Middle East, in China, in India, in Northern Africa, and different cultures influenced each other's view on alchemy, and that influenced other people's views on alchemy, and it was just sort of this like domino effect. And I've taken a lot of inspiration from those different aspects of alchemy, and I'm trying to synthesize them into sort of an entire, like, sort of an amalgamation form of alchemy in what lawful alchemy is. The Mander Empire is a colonialist power. They go, they reach out, they sort of subsume these other places and these other cultures and sort of take what they want from them and what they find valuable from them, merge them into into their line of thinking, and then just sort of discard everything else. And that's sort of in the real world in the Old Clay, that's sort of what the Mander Empire and the Court of Lawful Alchemy has done. From my research, like I'm far and away, like I'm not a scholar on ancient alchemy. I'm not some sort of authority on the matter. This is just the research that I've done personally, and I still have a ton more to learn. Like, I know this much comparatively towards all the knowledge that's out there. Parts of alchemy that I have found very inspiring were, for instance, in the Middle East, there's this guy named Jabir who wrote all of these books on sort of the nature of life and theoretical ways to produce artificial life and sort of shape it in specific ways. And that's where, for instance, the apothecaries of Parth have come out of. In ancient South Asia, there was Vedic alchemy, which was just very concerned with finding ways to increase the person's longevity and their health and their spiritual health, health both physical and spiritual, which is sort of a, in a lot of ways, a similar thing to what the Court of Lawful Alchemy is doing, but in a much more brutal, much more forceful way. Instead of trying to sort of find harmony with the universe, they're sort of trying to like break the world around them and sort of cheat the rules in order to increase their own longevity at sort of the cost of everything else. I hope that sort of touches on your question. I know that I sort of, weaved around it a little bit, but I would say the main cultural influences, just to summarize, would be the alchemy across Europe. The main cultural influences, to summarize, would just be the different views and philosophies on alchemy throughout Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and China, from antiquity through the Renaissance. Okay, the next question is from Solemnius, who is a Judge Tier patron. Thank you very much. You mentioned in one of your videos that you've been building this world for 10 years. How much has it changed since your original vision / inspiration? If so, what's a change you've made that you believe has fundamentally changed the TOC world for the better? Wow, this is a really good question. So I've been working on the old clay in some form of another for about 10 years. It started when I was a freshman in college. I went to an art school, and one of our courses was this 8-hour long figure drawing class. So one of the things that I did to practice my drawing skills in college was just to draw my hands in my sketchbook, because I'd be spending time in my dorm, and that was like the best reference that I had. So I would just sort of contort my hand in the weirdest possible ways I could and try to catch the light in strange ways and look at it from different angles and just draw that in my sketchbook. And I did that constantly, and it just got me really good at drawing hands. The issue was then I was like way better at drawing hands than I was at drawing anything else. So my sketchbook just sort of became filled with like pages and pages of these like horrible amalgamation hand monsters. Like literally just monsters made out of a bunch of hands, because that's what I was best at drawing, and that's what I liked to draw the most. And sort of as I went, they sort of took on a little bit of a narrative, like I was putting them in this world, and that was sort of the foundation of the old clay. As the years went on, I started playing a lot of D&D, and I really was inspired to sort of calcify what I had, sort of these like musings in my sketchbook, into something more tangible, because I thought maybe I'd want to run a campaign in this world one day. So that sort of shifted my world from this like world full of like these horrible hand monsters into something a little bit more like typical fantasy D&D setting, because I had to count for all of like the classes. Like, what does a wizard look like in this world? What does a sorcerer look like in this world? What does a cleric look like in this world? And I had to incorporate all of like the different species options, like a tiefling and goblin and dwarf and elf and all that. So it sort of shifted very much into sort of like a D&D focused setting for a while, for a couple of years. And I think the change that I made to the old clay that was like fundamental, that really shifted it from that, what it was, like this sort of like more generic fantasy thing, into what we have now. And by the way, just as a side note, that's what I love about world building, is that it's just sort of like this ever evolving, ever shifting thing as you're sort of trying to find the real essence of a world. Like, it started in one place, then it evolved to something else because that's what I needed at that time. And then it evolved into something else and something else. And at this point, it's sort of become a little bit more focused, and I know what the old clay is, but it is still evolving a little bit. You know, there's these, it's like a domino effect. You change one thing here and it affects all of these other things because they're all interconnected. New things are coming up that are really exciting, and then they force me to have to like reconfigure everything. But the thing that, the change that I made that was like monumental to the world was the removal of dragons. I love dragons, obviously, like they're just objectively rad. And during the sort of like D&D phase of my world building, dragons were super central to the mythology and the magic and the system itself. Back then, the lawful alchemy wasn't fully calcified. Like, there was alchemy, but it was kind of like this little side thing. And the majority of the magic system, because it sort of because it had to fit into the D&D 5e mechanics, was mostly like the classic like elemental magic, like fire and lightning and cold and all that. So that was like the dragons themselves, like these progenitors of this elemental magic, were deeply rooted into the world, like from the foundation, from the like origin story of the world up until the modern point where like everything revolved around dragons. As I started sort of shifting towards this like more alchemy focused setting, there was this tension between this new direction I was going that was a little bit more like grittier, for the lack of a better word, like grounded alchemy setting, versus this sort of like a little bit more whimsical sword and sorcery classic fantasy setting. Like I feel like they were at odds with each other, and the thing sort of in between them was dragons. Like that was one thing that I had done so much work on, and like half of my world building was about dragons and like the hierarchy of dragons and who each of them were and what they meant to the world and the things that they did and all that. So it felt impossible to excise that piece of information from the setting because it was so foundational. So I was sort of having to find ways to make both of them fit, like this alchemy and these dragons. And not to say that there couldn't be a setting where that would work, like there absolutely would, but I was so intrigued in going down to this lawful alchemy direction, and I felt like dragons was holding it back. So at a certain point, I just decided to bite the bullet, and I'm like, you know what? These things are out of here. I cut everything out that had to do with dragons, and that was painful because that was like deleting like half of the work that I had done, probably more than half. But the wonderful thing is, like I mentioned earlier, world building is sort of like a domino effect situation where you change one thing and it just sort of impacts the thing next to it and the thing next to that and the thing next to that. And now that I had all this like open vacant space, it was like this lawful alchemy thing that I had been pushing over to the side because it felt at odds with the world, just sort of like rippled out and filled all those openings. And it was actually like it was a lot easier to fill in those gaps than I thought it might have been. But that was sort of the big foundational change that altered the setting from something more like generic fantasy to what we have now. And in retrospect, I'm really, really glad that I did it, because I think it developed something that I like a lot better, that I'm personally extremely proud of. And as the old clay continues to evolve and continues to sort of like discover its own identity, I know that fundamental change is sort of what allowed it to go down this path. The next question is from Raga Raja, who is also a judge patron. Thank you very much. I would love to know more about who is allowed to become an alchemist and why. Are they selected for their disposition or brilliance towards specific activities? Are they simply rich and are able to afford the primes? Is there a cultural component that makes it a mark of status to have one of your kids become an alchemist, and so on and so forth? Yes, to all of the above. Alchemy in the old clay, the alchemists can be warriors and poets and scholars and, what have you. But I think in terms of a real world equivalent, in terms of who becomes an alchemist and sort of how they're structured within society, I think a good touchstone is politicians. It's not a perfect one-to-one, but theoretically, in the real world, politics are a merit-based field where you are the best at what you do, you provide the best service, you get the votes for the people, and you go in there. But also in the real world, we know that it's not always that simple, and it doesn't always work like that, because money can buy you a lot of things, power and influence can buy you a lot of things, And at a certain point, it kind of becomes like a popularity contest. It's sort of similar with alchemists. Like, yes, they are certainly chosen for their aptitude, because the Court of Lawful Alchemy is very interested in, pursuing their craft and moving it forward. So just like, if you're trying to get into a college, if you have higher test scores, it's going to be a higher chance that you get in, right? But if people are powerful and have the money, they can sort of just, cut the line, so to speak. So there is like a pretty significant, like, institutionalized aspect of alchemy, where alchemists just do have more societal power than non-alchemists. So there is definitely that aspect of it too. You'll notice that in the old clay, I don't really talk too much about like nobility or royal families outside of, the Mander family who controls the Mander Empire. There is nobility, but it's not necessarily super important, to be honest. The power structures have sort of shifted away from royalty and towards like institutionalized power, like the Court of Lawful Alchemy. So nobility exists, it's just not, they don't have as much pull as you might expect. The one thing that they might have access to is money, which money is always important. So, if they have money, they can buy their way into the Court of Lawful Alchemy. In that case, they do have power, but the power comes from the court, not necessarily their family name. Okay, the last question for today comes from Kasumi, who asks, I was wondering if you had any kind of goal for the old clay, like a book or something animated. I'm genuinely just curious, and I really love the world building you've done. Thank you so much. This has been like one of the most common questions I've gotten about the old clay. So there are projects that I'm working on the side, and things I have planned for the future. But I don't want to announce those yet. I'm not going to talk until there's something to talk about. And when those do come up, I will make sure to announce them to you guys. Like, you'll know about it. But I have things that I'm working on right now. For the immediate future, the old clay is just going to continue to be a world building project. But there definitely will be more old clay stuff than just what appears on YouTube. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Thank you all so much for watching this first Q&A video. It was pretty fun to make. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too long. My recording software says that I've been going for almost 50 minutes, so we'll see how much I cut this down. But hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being on this Patreon and supporting me. It's, like I said at the start of the video, this is all like still very, very surreal for me. So thank you for your support, and I am going to keep making some really cool stuff for you guys to dig into. But that's it for me. I will see you guys like this at the end of August. See ya.